Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. You are in for a treat today because we are talking about anxiety. And unfortunately, anxiety is in epidemic proportions in our society. It has risen, especially in the last few years. And think of yourself. Do you get anxious? Do you get anxious a lot? Do you get anxious a little bit? I don't think anyone is exempt from anxiety. And so many of my clients ask me, what do I do with my anxiety? How do I deal with it? Well, I am very pleased to announce a very special guest this morning, Dr. Catherine Pittman, who is the co-author of Rewire Your Anxious Brain, How to Use the Neuroscience of Fear to End Anxiety, Panic, and Worry. And her second book is Rewire Your OCD Brain. And interestingly enough, that has gone on the rise as well, which Dr. Pittman will explain to us. And finally, we have Taming Your Amygdala, which is the aggression center of the brain, brain-based strategies to quiet the anxious mind. So do you call the amygdala Amy, Dr. Pittman?
No, but I've definitely heard that you. Yeah. Duffy, I definitely, okay. Because the amygdala does stump some people when they see that. They don't know exactly how to say it, but we say amygdala. Even though there's two of them, we still call it one thing. There's two of them.
See, I didn't even know that there were two amygdalas.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
One on the right, like mirror image, like our brain, you know.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes, right, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, that's really, really helpful already, Dr. Catherine Pittman. Okay, so you are a certified psychologist and you teach at St. Mary's, which originally was Notre Dame, but it male-female split, something like that. And
it's a women's college. Yes, it is.
It's a women's college. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And obviously you teach psychology and communication skills, which a lot of psychology courses do not include, which I think is incredibly ignorant. But I am so glad for you that you're doing this. And you write a lot. Obviously, you write a lot. My goodness, I'm in awe. So how on earth, and I know it's a huge question, well, before I ask you how to rewire your anxious brain, I'm interested in how you got into this field, this very particular field.
Well, I was assigned in graduate school to a person who was doing rat research, which originally made me cry because I didn't understand why a clinician would need to do that. But the truth is, because I was assigned to his lab, I learned about fear in other animals. And this was, even though at the time, and keep this in mind in your lives, when something is handed to you that you think is not a good thing, that there may be a silver lining, because I'm one of the few clinicians who really understands fear research in other animals besides humans. We are animals, and our brains work very similarly when it comes to fear. When it comes to fear, we have a lot of other stuff going on that other animals don't. But when it comes to fear, and anxiety is a kind of fear, you know, our brains work very similarly. So that early experience, understanding fear in animals, and it was rats, understanding fear, really allowed me to understand some of the neuroscience that your average therapists can't understand, because a lot of neuroscience research has been conducted on rats, trying to understand fear in rat brains, which have amygdalas. Guess what? They have amygdalas too. And they have the same kind of processes that go on in their brains. And so it's a sad truth. But when we are afraid or we are anxious, sometimes we're acting on the basis of what you might consider more kind of instinctual processes of avoiding or fighting, running, and not using our cortexes. In fact, here's a thing. When we are anxious, sometimes our cortexes or the thinking parts of our brains almost get turned off.
Right.
And we can't think. And that's also true. You mentioned the amygdala is also a source of our anger response too. Also, when we're angry, it's very difficult for us to use other parts of our brain when we're being dominated by these lower emotional centers in our brain, like the amygdala. So anyway, how I got into it was by understanding research related to animal emotions. And unfortunately, like I'm saying, when we are angry or afraid, sometimes we don't have much more cortex available to us than other animals do in their lives. Does that make sense?
You don't mean animals have more cortex available to them than we do?
No, we have more available.
Oh, we have more
cortex available. But when we're anxious or afraid, or we're angry, our cortex gets turned off in a way, and the amygdala takes over the driver's seat.
Right.
And so people will say, "Why do I react this way?" I'm not. It's not what I want to do, but I don't feel I'm in control. And this is what this is really about: is that we have built into us a defense response. You might have heard it called the fight or flight response. Right. Probably the best term for it is the fight, flight, freeze response, because
I agree. I completely agree.
Because those are the things people can do when they're in that state of mind. So in order to really understand your anxiety, it really helps to understand the defense response and how it's built into us. And
absolutely. For survival, for our mechanism, our body mechanism to survive. And, I wanted to I'm thinking about when I took Psychology 101 about 100 years ago, we were taught that human beings have very few instincts other than the fear of falling and the sucking of the nipple. I mean, really,
well, it's more complicated than instincts because, and even in other animals, it goes beyond instincts because the amygdala can learn. So it's not that it's just programmed, but it has programming that limits it. But the amygdala learns, and you can teach it things. And this is what's so helpful for people to know.
Brilliant. I never knew the amygdala could learn.
Mm-hmm. The amygdala makes emotional memories for us.
Right.
It makes memories. And when I say a memory, I want to be clear that I'm not saying like a story memory, like this is what happened, this happened, and then she said this and I said this, or then I went over there. Not that kind of memory. I mean, a memory so that when you encounter something, you don't just remember this thing, but you have emotions connected to it too. The amygdala connects emotions to your memory. So one of my favorite examples to use is to say, if you take your child and you put them on the lap of that big chubby man with a white beard and a velvet red coat. If you do that with your child and you're taking a lot of pictures, sometimes what happens is the child develops an emotional memory that is not a pleasant one because the child's being held down by a stranger, not a pleasant experience. And so what can happen is the next time the child sees maybe just a person with a white beard or sees an image of Santa Claus, the child might have a fear reaction to it. And that learning occurs in your amygdala. And that's what makes our amygdala very valuable, that it's not just instincts, but your personal experiences will teach the amygdala what to be afraid of. Sometimes accidentally, you know?
Yeah, we don't even. So I want to see if I can get this straight. So the amygdala is the emotional part of the brain. Would you say the limbic system No, that's too simple.
Well, you know what? It's really complicated, but what is good for people to know is that the amygdala is a part of the brain that has a protective role, and it can create emotional and physiological reactions that we will interpret as emotions. But the amygdala is doing this thing in our body actually to get us ready to run or to fight or to stay motionless. And it's really based on evolutionary history when those kind of responses helped us. So what happens, though, is nowadays when we feel anxiety in our body or we feel fear, we don't recognize that the amygdala is prone to misinterpretations, like seeing Santa as dangerous when Santa is a kind and gentle figure, but he's holding you still and because he's trying to be in a picture with you. And it's going to be a picture of you crying,
Yes.
as a 2-year-old. But it's going to be a picture nonetheless. So anyway, the amygdala can misinterpret a stick on the ground to look like a snake. It can misinterpret a person who's trying to be kind to you. And that is because the amygdala does not learn on the basis of logic, but it learns on the basis of association, which is if something bad is happening to you while you're exposed to something, you're likely to get a negative emotional reaction conditioned or learned to that. Now, when we were in school, Dr. Duffy, they were talking to us about classical conditioning. They didn't tell us it happens in the amygdala. That's because they didn't know it happens in the amygdala. Right. But now we do know. And it's Joe Ledoux and his labs that did so much research. All of his colleagues also, a lot of people worked on trying to understand where that learning was happening. And they did that in rats because, people don't like their brains cut open and,
or being put in cages,
or being kept, or being put through fear eliciting experiences. So we need to do that in someone. And most people allow that to happen in rats. They think that that's okay. But I learned about, how rats learn to fear and how they learn to get over their fear, right? And then I can use that information to help people. So how do you get over fear of Santa once you've had fear connected with him? Well, we learned how we could do that. And that's why my book is called Rewire Your Anxious Brain, because it's saying we can learn, the brain can learn, and the amygdala can learn. But here's the thing, it doesn't learn from, if we sit down with people in therapy and we talk to them about things, lecture them, explain the amygdala or explain it doesn't teach the amygdala because the amygdala doesn't learn from that. The amygdala learns from experiences. So you have to put the amygdala through an experience with Santa that is neutral, pleasant, which we could probably arrange. And eventually the child gets over the fear of Santa, but not from you telling the child Santa's nice, Santa's friendly,
So this would be called a corrective emotional experience.
Yes. We also call it exposure therapy. You might have heard that, or systematic sensitization. But knowing how to change the brain is not just knowing how to change the amygdala, but also we do have to change people's cortexes. So for one thing, for example,
when you say cortex, you mean the frontal lobe?
The frontal lobes, the temporal lobes, where we have our memories, I'm sorry, my dogs are making a little noise there.
Okay.
Their amygdalas have been activated. By a vehicle going down the street. So anyway, what I'm trying to tell you about this is that we can change some of the way we think about our fear. Right?
Yes.
So, for example, one of the things we've already just mentioned is that your amygdala can react in error. There can be misinterpretations that this person is dangerous or this stick is a snake. And, you might be in your shower and see a shape that is, a little gray shape. It could be a wad of hair, but you might react to it as if it were a spider.
Yeah. And if you saw the movie Psycho,
oh my goodness,
I remember reading that Janet Leigh did not shower for many, many, many years after she made Psycho.
And what we talked about is her amygdala learned something new about showers from having to be in that situation.
Exactly.
And that's a really good example. And it's a shower is one of the most wonderful, safe situations you can be in. But an amygdala can learn that that's not true. And that's what makes it so valuable to us still, and why people will say, well, since we've evolved and we're now in safe environments, why is it that we still have these kind of reactions? And it's because every once in a while it saves our life. And so I want to tell you a little bit about this part of the brain that people should know. And this is going to be very unusual. Your amygdala can see and hear things before you can see and hear them. That's because it's set up in our brain to receive sensory information from your eyes and your ears and even from your body, like someone touching your back or whatever.
Kinesthetic, yes.
Something crawling in your hair,
It's
designed to receive that information before it gets into the part of your brain that processes it, which takes a little longer for it to be processed. And so this is why, have you ever had this happen? Had this ever happened to you, Dr. Duffy, where you're on the freeway and something comes into the lane ahead of you and you react so quickly that you don't even know what you've done?
We have peripheral vision, don't we?
Well, what it is that before you even process it in your cortex, the information about something coming into your brain has been directly communicated to the amygdala. But the amygdala isn't going to see it in the detail that you see. It's going to see, but you know what? It doesn't matter whether it's a ball or a child or another vehicle, something coming into your lane, seeing it early could save your life, even just a fraction of a second. And the other thing that the amygdala can do, not only sees it, but it can organize a reaction in your body that causes you to move your leg, your arms, whatever, and evade that object in the lane more quickly than you could think what to do. And that's why you might be like, did I do that? I mean, it almost is like I didn't even do it. I did it so fast. I couldn't have told myself to do it. And some people say that's a reflex, but it's not a reflex because a reflex is when you react based on just the information coming to your spinal cord. Like if you touch something hot and you pull back.
Yes.
The information, the feeling of that sensation came to your spinal cord, and then immediately, because that was a pain sensation, it sent a signal back for you to just jerk your hand back. But you made a complicated response. You might have actually hit the gas. You might have turned into the median. You might have hit the brake. It's a complicated response that took more of your brain, not just your reflexes from your spinal cord, but this is your amygdala basically kind of hijacking your brain, taking the control from your cortex. Now, so now if this is happening in us, this is going to tell you something. First of all, we have already learned the amygdala can react in error, right? So, I had a shadow fall across the road and I reacted to it,
Yes.
I didn't need to react to an error, error. But if it had been a dog, I could have saved the dog's life, So the other thing, though, is the feelings that change in our body. I'm going to list some of them that the amygdala can make happen in just a fraction of a second before you.
Fraction of a second. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here's some examples. Okay. Can change your breathing, can change your heart rate, can change your adrenaline level, release adrenaline into your body so you feel a surge. Might be like a flush of energy or heat. It can make you sweat. It can also shut down your digestive processes. It can focus your attention. You might have been listening to what was on the radio. You stop listening completely and you're completely focused on what's in front of you. All these things the amygdala can do in a fraction of a second. And it's a good thing. It saves our life sometimes. But I want to tell you, in our safe environment, it's really not designed for the 21st century. It's designed for predators. But you know what? When you're on the road there, you're glad you have it. You're glad that you can make a quick response. Get out of the lane before it could save your life.
And I have to say, Dr. Pittman, that if you watch the 11 o'clock news, well, it used to be the 11 o'clock news. Now it's 24/7. And you hear the threats in the world. then and then your amygdala reacts. And to have to say to yourself, well, I feel very sad for these people, but I'm safe in my bed and I can donate money, I can vote, I can do things, but right now I'm safe. So is that how it works?
Well, it'd be good if we could just do that and just tell our amygdala I'm safe. But if the amygdala has just seen bleeding people or thinking about dying people, someone who maybe looks a lot like your grandmother or mother, then your amygdala is going to react. And so one thing that's happened with the pandemic is we have been exposed to a lot of threatening information, a lot of thoughts of death, a lot of thoughts of illness, a lot of thoughts of whether this person poses a danger to you. They don't have a mask on. Maybe they do have a mask on. Now that makes you feel even more scared because now you think they actually are carrying something. That's why all of these cues that we are reacting to. And what the reaction is always this fight, flight, freeze response, even though that's not necessarily what you need. You need to go get an immunization. You need to wear a mask. That's not what the amygdala, that comes from our cortex to know those kind of reactions. So we have a part of the brain that is what creates our fear and our anxiety, and it's rooted in this defense response. So here's some things we should know about anxiety. One, anxiety is an emotional and physiological reaction in our body. It does not mean something bad is going to happen. It means that the amygdala believes there's a threat and it wants you to take evasive action or to fight or to freeze and do not move. And so it's very important to understand that when you're experiencing anxiety, it can, and I talk about this with my students, you can have a high level of anxiety and still get an A on that exam when you take it. And my students really relate to that. They'll say, yeah, I'm very anxious before I take the exam. But did that mean you were going to fail the exam? They say, not necessarily, No. And some of them make the mistake of thinking they need the anxiety to do well on the exam, but that's not true. They need to study to do well on the exam.
Well, what about the adrenaline, though?
Actually, adrenaline in your body is more likely to interfere with recalling memories than it is to help you recall a memory, especially if it's a nice, boring memory, like the definition of a word. You need to be more calm. So anxiety is not helpful for an examination, but it's helpful on the freeway, right?
Got it. So is it possible for one to be both relaxed and alert?
Yeah, you can be relaxed and alert, both. Sure you can. Alert does not take adrenaline.
There you go.
You can have just some dopamine. You can feel very alert and aroused and excited, but not an adrenaline that is designed for a defense response. So understanding your anxiety, if you understand it comes from the amygdala and you want to understand, for example, okay, if I know it comes from the amygdala, then I know I shouldn't always trust it as being an accurate predictor, right? But you're also going to ask yourself, and ask me, if I'm your therapist, you're going to say, can I change it? Can I calm it down? How do I communicate with it? And I say, you don't communicate with words. And some of the ways that we communicate with it are things people think are actually really rather silly. Like, for example, did this happen to you, Dr. Duffy, where when you tried to tell people that relaxation training, learning to breathe deeply and relax your muscles could be a helpful response in your life, people were like,
I breathe anyway. You can't teach me to breathe.
I know. What is that? But you know what? When I tell people, we have machines now that allow us, called fMRIs, that allow us to look at the amygdala in real life. Without cutting into your brain, we can watch your amygdala. And what if I tell you that if you do a certain kind of deep breathing, we can actually see the amygdala get less activated? Suddenly people say to me, can you tell me about this kind of breathing? Can you explain how to do it? Whereas people didn't really believe in it before. But I can show you evidence that you can relax. Listen carefully. You can calm down your amygdala through deep breathing faster than if you take Xanax. because Xanax, you have to digest it. It has to get through your body, it has to go to the brain, right?
And Xanax is not good for people.
And Xanax has all kinds of negative effects.
Yeah.
You can become dependent on it to manage your anxiety.
Oh, yes.
You could be teaching your amygdala to react differently. You know what Xanax does? It basically puts your amygdala to sleep, which is very pleasant for you because now that part that creates anxiety is asleep, so it can't create the anxiety. So you say, oh, I feel so relaxed. But you know what? And I'll tell you this from my experience as a professor. When you are asleep, you can't learn. Those students who fall asleep in my class get nothing out of the lecture. And the amygdala needs experience to learn. It does not learn from Xanax, you know?
Right.
So if I tell you there's a couple things like relaxation breathing, like, for example, here's another thing. If you exercise, you're more likely to calm the amygdala down also. So, for example, even if you haven't changed anything in the situation you're stressed about, if you go take a brisk walk, you will feel calmer. That's because the thing that is creating your anxiety, the amygdala, believes that fight or flight is the answer. And if you go do that, if you go run, it's that homeostatic mechanism in our brain that's like, okay, we got away. Even though you still have to pay that bill. You know, you haven't gotten away from it, but you are calmer in your brain because of that exercise affecting the amygdala. Another thing is sleep is very, very important to the amygdala, and it's extended sleep. And in America, in the United States of America, we do not believe in sleep. People in the United States think that sleep, you can sleep.
It's a waste of time.
Waste of time. But
in a consumer,
the amygdala, it makes the amygdala more calm.
Right.
So knowing those calming techniques, if you understand the amygdala is the source of your anxiety, you can incorporate into your life things that will make you a calmer person. But if you don't know about the amygdala, then why would you ever think those things help? Because obviously going for a brief run doesn't help you with your mortgage. But if you understand the amygdala is set up for a fight or flight response, and when it makes fear or anxiety occur in our body and makes all those physical changes occur in our body, what's happening is you are helping to calm the amygdala down. And that's the source of those emotional and physiological reactions. Now, if you want to teach the amygdala something, that just calms it, okay?
Yes.
If you want to teach the amygdala something, you want to say, okay, I want you to know a shower is not dangerous, or I want you to know it's not dangerous. Then you have to teach it through an experience. You have to show it. Good way to say it. You have to show it. You have to say. And so there's these processes of, as you said, emotional learning, where we put people in this, and you can do it very gradually. You don't have to make the kids sit down on Santa's lap until they learn. You can do it a gradual process. And we can do this getting you over your fear of dogs or public speaking, or all through this process. It's called exposure, systematic desensitization, but it's teaching the amygdala. When you and I were in school, Dr. Duffy, they didn't tell us it was teaching the amygdala. They told us it worked, but we didn't know where it worked in the brain. Now we know.
Guess what, everybody? We have to end this show.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank goodness Dr. Catherine Pittman is coming back for part 2. Thank you so much, Dr. Catherine Pittman. You are a wonderful guest and such an expert and an author of Rewire Your Anxious Brain, Rewire Your OCD Brain, and Taming Your Amygdala. Pittman, Pittman. Come back and we'll hear more of Dr. Catherine Pittman. And this is Dr. Duffy Spencer saying goodbye for now and wishing you great relationships.